Now, let's close out the show with another
State of the State.
State of the State.
State of the State.
State of the State is my segment where I talk a little more theoretically about stuff in the world. And last week I talked about Volcker shock and how neoliberalism was kind of came to be. In this episode, I'm going to give an example of an industry and kind of how the changes in that industry over time, what those changes say about global capitalism. So I'm going to talk about the progression of the auto industry and what it kind of says, what we can see about changes in the world through this industry. So, we had European cars, we had American cars, then we had Japanese cars, and Japanese cars for a while had a pretty bad reputation. Even today, they kind of retain this reputation of being kind of cheap, basic cars, but, now we think of them as affordable and reliable. Like when you hear Honda and Toyota, yeah, they are still the most affordable and reliable. Affordable in like what your money's worth and reliable cars. But then, so there's this kind of trend where it goes from Europe and America to Japan, and then we have Korean cars, which are getting an increasingly better reputation. Hyundai is not a Toyota, but I would rely on a Hyundai as much as a Subaru or a Mazda, and I would definitely rely on a Hyundai more than a Nissan, or at least like a commuter car Nissan, not their like sports cars, but anyway. There's also Kia. Like I went to a import face-off event, which is where people can like drag race their cars, like they're like modified street cars, and I saw several Kia Stingers there. If you go back to the early 2000s, the idea that you would see a Kia at an import racing event, it would be considered insane. Like that's how much the reputation of Korean cars has improved over time. And now, over 25% of the world's car production is in China. China manufactures more cars than any other country, even though we still think of like the US, Germany, and Japan as being the big three. Not only that, but 40% of the world's electric cars are in China, and electric cars are obviously a growing industry. Most of the best-selling electric cars, you might not know this if you live in the US because you see Teslas and maybe like Chevy Sparks or whatever. Most of the best-selling electric cars are in China. So this is just me kind of showing like how this like industry, it builds up other countries' industries, and then the industry slowly trickles there. Like for example, Kia, which I was just talking about, it started as a Korean manufacturer of Mazda, Ford, and some other cars. After a couple decades of Kia having a poor reputation, they merged basically with Hyundai to make a strong and reputable national industry. This happened with Japan, it happened with Korea, it's beginning to happen with China, and now similar things seem to be happening in India and maybe Mexico, but we'll see. Like, for example, Jaguar Range Rover, a historically British and British associated company, is now owned by an Indian company, Tata Motors. India and Mexico are now two of the biggest car manufacturing countries behind China, and then, 4 countries with reputation for car manufacturing: the US, Japan, Germany, and South Korea. So we could easily see Mexico and India become even bigger centers for car manufacturing in the future and having, more identifiably national car brands. And then in the meantime, there's stuff like Nissan and Mitsubishi, who are now partially owned by the French car company Renault. Since then, Nissan and Mitsubishi have progressively made worse cars. And like I said, I would trust a Korean car more than I would trust a Nissan, except for like the Z series, GTRs, etc. Maybe an Infinity. These are more high-end sports cars, and they're still manufactured in Japan at higher quality. But like most of their cars, like Versas, they have really poor transmissions, and that's besides the point because, I would have never guessed that Nissan, a prestigious Japanese automaker who made some of the coolest cars ever, would have a worse reputation than Hyundai. And the ultimate point with this is this process, the exact process of production and globalization that has happened in many industries, and it looks to be happening in the tech industry too, where the production builds up in one country and then they begin outsourcing the production while keeping the corporate stuff domestic. Well, eventually, when you outsource production, the production starts growing where they need their own separate corporate structures. For example, we can't really see Amazon being defeated right now. It's like so monolithic. But Chinese companies like Alibaba and JD are growing, and they have more access to potential user bases. Like, just think of the potential growth in Chinese e-commerce, which has like 6 times the people we do compared to Amazon. And we can see a trajectory where the US continues to get hollowed out in terms of production because we outsource production. Meanwhile, China has quickly become a massive, gigantic, productive monolith of an economy that will probably have lots of up and downs over the next decades, but ultimately will be the biggest economy in the world by a lot. And so I hope this kind of spells out the process of our current economy, because this happens in a lot of industries. This is not unique to cars. It's not unique to tech. It's not unique to e-commerce. If it's unique to anything, it's simply neoliberalism, but really it's unique to capitalism as a whole. And that is
State of the state.
the state of the state.
State of the state.